The Pure Base 500 FX from Be Quiet looks really nice, but is it worth its 150 USD MSRP? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I test and review PC cases, CPU coolers, PC case fans, and graphics cards. Before I get into this overview, to have full disclosure, Be Quiet did send me this case to test and review, but as always, all opinions expressed in this video are mine and mine alone. So if you do end up liking the video, can you please hit that like button? And if you really like the video, how about subscribing to the channel? I will have timestamps or chapters down in the description, so you can jump to whatever interests you, but I do recommend watching the whole review. Okay, with that out of the way, on to the overview. There are 4 versions of the Pure Base 500. There's the Pure Base 500, which has a covered front panel. The left side panel is metal. There are 3 color options, and it has a starting MSRP of 80 USD. There is the Pure Base 500 window, which also has a covered front panel. The left side panel in this case is tempered glass. There are again 3 color options, and this has a starting MSRP of 90 USD. There's the Pure Base 500 DX, which has a meshed front panel. The left side panel is again tempered glass. There are 2 color options for this version, and it has a starting MSRP of 110 USD. And finally, there is what we'll be looking at in this video, the Pure Base 500 FX, which has a mesh front panel. The left side panel is also tempered glass. There is only 1 color option, and it has a starting MSRP of 150 USD. Be Quiet does provide a small bag that has all the screws and fittings in it. There are also some zip ties and a user manual. The 500 FX also comes with an ARGB fan hub that is pre-installed. Taking a look at the case now, the dimensions of the 500 FX are 46.3 centimeters high by 23.2 centimeters wide by 45 centimeters deep. So this is a good size ATX case. The 500 FX has a metal mesh front panel. The front I/O is located on the top of the front panel. There is separate ports for the audio out and microphone. There is only one USB 2.0 Type A port, but there is also one USB 3.1 Type C port, as well as an LED and power button. The front panel can be removed by pulling the bottom of the panel away from the chassis. The front I/O is not connected to the front panel, and the ARGB LEDs that are in the front panel are connected by pins, so you don't need to worry about damaging any cables when removing the front panel. Taking a closer look at the panel, the metal mesh of the front panel is pretty open, so it shouldn't restrict much airflow. Looking back at the chassis, we see a dust filter covering 3 120mm pre-installed ARGB fans. This filter is held in by some clips and magnets, so cleaning the front panel and this front filter should be pretty simple. Moving to the top of the case, there is a large magnetic dust filter with some Be Quiet branding on it. Moving to the rear of the case, we see the location of the rear I/O, the pre-installed 140mm ARGB fan. There are 7 horizontal expansion slots, all with reusable covers. And along the bottom, we see the power supply location. Taking a look at the bottom of the case, there are 4 plastic feet. These feet give 20mm of ventilation for the power supply. The feet are made of plastic, but there is a rubber pad on the bottom of each foot, so the case won't just simply slide around. There is a removable dust filter along the bottom of the case. You access this filter from the front of the case. So again, cleaning this filter should be, again, pretty simple. Moving on to the right side of the case, the right side panel is steel. To remove the right side panel, undo the 2 captive thumb screws at the rear of the case, then slide the panel back and lift it away. The side panel is made from a single sheet of bent steel with some okay sized grooves, so it feels pretty rigid. There's also some rubber or some acoustic padding on the side of the panel. This is supposed to help reduce noise. Moving to the left side of the case, the left side panel is tempered glass. To remove the glass panel, you should put the case onto the right side of the case, then undo the 4 thumb screws that are holding the glass in, then lift the glass up and away. This glass panel is 3/16 tempered glass and has little to no tint to it. And that's the exterior of the case. Now, before I move on to the interior of the case, if you do like what I'm doing here, could you please use my Amazon Associates links that are in the description? All you need to do is click on the link that suits your location, and when you add an item or items to your cart and order them, the channel will get a small kickback at no added cost to you. It's a great way to help out the channel. Okay, now for the inside of the case. There is a basement. The top of the shroud to the basement does have a large area of triangular ventilation holes, so the GPU should be able to pull out a lot of air out of the basement to help with ventilation. This shroud also has 3 cutouts along the motherboard tray for running cables. Now looking at the motherboard tray itself, there are 5 more cutouts, 3 along the top of the motherboard tray, 1 behind the motherboard location, and 1 large vertical cutout with a cable cover along the front of the case. This large vertical cutout is where most of your cables will likely be running through. Okay, the Pure Base 500FX supports mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. The max GPU length is 369 millimeters, but that will be cut down if you go with a front-mounted radiator. The max CPU cooler height in the Pure Base 500FX is 190 millimeters. Turning the case around to look at the backside of the motherboard tray, there is up to 25 millimeters behind the motherboard tray for running cables. There are a number of cable tie-offs as well as a Velcro strap cabling channel along the side of the case. There is a 2-bay, 2.5-inch SSD sled. One of these bays is being used by the ARGB hub, so there is really only space for one 2.5-inch SSD. The cable cover that covers that large vertical cutout can be removed by unscrewing 1 captive thumb screw. This cover also doubles as an SSD sled as well, where you can fit 2 2.5-inch SSDs. Moving on to the basement, where we see a drive cage. This drive cage can hold 2 3.5-inch drives or 1 3.5-inch and 1 2.5-inch drive. The cage can also be easily moved or removed. The drive cage can be removed by unscrewing the 2 captive thumb screws, then sliding the cage out. To reinstall the cage, make sure to align the captive thumb screws on the cage to the threads on the backside of the motherboard tray. Then slide the cage in and make sure to fasten the captive screws to those threads. With the cage in its default or stock location, there is 255 millimeters for the power supply and cables. With the drive cage in its back location, there's about 225 millimeters for the power supply and cables. Then with the drive cage completely removed, there will be just about 375 millimeters for the power supply and cables. But that will be cut down if you go with a 360 millimeter radiator. And that brings us to the cooling options for the Pure Base 500FX. The 500FX has 4 pre-installed ARGB PWM fans. These fans have a 4-pin PWM connector and a 5-volt ARGB 50/50 connector. Now, this case can support up to 6 120 millimeter fans. So that's 3 fans along the front, 2 fans along the top, and 1 fan at the rear. If you prefer having 140 millimeter fans, you can have up to 5. That's 2 at the front, 2 along the top, and 1 at the rear. For radiator support, you can have up to a 360 millimeter at the front, or up to a 280 along the top, and or a 120 at the rear. And that's the overview. Now on to my build notes. Starting with cable management, I was able to fit my non-modular power supply as well as all of my cable extensions while keeping things fairly clean looking. Now I did have some issues getting the right side panel on when I was done, but I was able to get it on. Now with that being said, I would highly recommend, as I always do for every case, using a modular power supply. As you can see, it's not necessarily needed, but not having a wad of extra Molex and SATA cables will just make dealing with all the cable management that much easier. Next thing I wanted to go over is the ARGB hub and the ARGB fans. All the fans are Be Quiet Lightwings fans. For the ARGB LEDs, the Lightwings fans and the ARGB hub both use the 3-pin 50/50 connector. So adding extra fans or strips or whatever you want to be adding should be pretty simple, but it is something to keep in mind because not all manufacturers use the 50/50 connector. And if you do want to learn more about these fans, I have tested and reviewed them. I'll have a link down in the description to those reviews. Now the hub can control the 5-volt ARGB LEDs. There are a number of presets built into the hub is what I'm trying to say. And you go through these presets by just clicking the LED button on the top of the case or at the front I/O. It is also possible to plug in the 3-pin 50/50 lead from the hub into your motherboard so that you can use your motherboard's software to control the LEDs as well. To do this, you'll need to plug the 3-pin lead into your motherboard, then hold down the LED button on the case for 3 seconds. and that will switch it over to the software on your motherboard. Holding down the LED button again for 3 seconds will switch control back to the hub. The only real issue I had building in this case was how tight the cable cover angle is there. It's like a 90-degree angle, so I wasn't able to get a good bend out of my cable extensions. Now I understand this isn't really a huge issue like it's really tiny, but it is something to keep in mind if you are looking to use cable extensions and have a nice bend to your cable extensions. I know a lot of people do like how that looks. So you'd either have to remove the cable cover or you're not really going to get a good bend. And if you do remove the cable cover, then you're going to lose those 2 SSD mounts. So just something to keep in mind if that is something you're wanting or not wanting or don't care about. Again, just putting that out there. And that finishes off all my build notes. So on to the temperature testing. If you do have any questions on how I test the cases, please watch my case testing methodology video. I'll have a card along the top and I will also have it linked down in the description. Now I didn't test too many fan configurations here because it does come with 4 fans pre-installed and it honestly does quite well. So starting with the CPU workload temperatures, the stock fans at full speed had the CPU average steady state temperature at 66.3 C. The stock fans running at full speed with no front panel or filters had the CPU's average steady state temperature at 65 C. So the front panel and filters aren't really affecting the CPU temperature in any meaningful way. In the fan normalized testing, the CPU average steady state temperature was at 66 C. And then having the case fans set to a noise level of 35 dBA had the average steady state CPU temperature at 67.2 C. Now for the game testing, the stock fans at full speed had the GPU's average steady state temperature at 67.6 C and had the CPU's average steady state temperature at 40 C. Then still having the fans at full speed, but removing the front panel and all the filters, had the GPU's average steady state temperature go down to 65.5 C and the CPU's average steady state temperature at 38.5 C. So the front panel and filters are affecting the GPU's temperatures, but not really in any meaningful way. Then in the fan normalized testing, the GPU's average steady state temperature to 70.8 C, and the CPU's average steady state temperature was at 49.8 C. So having that bottom fan really does help the GPU in this case. Then having the case fans set to a noise level of 35 dBA, had the GPU's average steady state temperature at 69 and the CPU's average steady state temperature at 41.7. Okay, so comparing the PureBase 500FX's stock configuration to all the other cases I've tested, looking at the sound level testing first, it's in the middle of this chart. Now, most of the cases that are above or quieter than the PureBase 500FX do only have 1 fan. And since the FX500 comes with 4 fans, this is actually pretty good. Moving on to the CPU workload testing, the 500FX is topping the chart. It is pretty much matching the LANCool 2 and the LANCool 215, which are both excellent cases. In the game testing, the 500FX is nearing the top of the chart again, and again tying the LANCool 2 mesh. Moving along to the 35 noise equalized testing. So all of the cases have had their case fans noise equalized to 35 dBA from 50 centimeters away. In the CPU workload test, the 500FX is second from the top, again tying the LANCool 2 mesh and the LANCool 215. Moving on to the noise equalized game testing, the 500FX again lands between the LANCool 2 mesh and the LANCool 215. And finally moving on to the fan normalized testing. So the sound level of the 500FX with the 4 Arctic P12 fans was 40.5 dBA, which lands it pretty much at the bottom, which is pretty typical for the cases that do have the front mesh panel. It just doesn't dampen in the sound as much as a solid panel does. In the fan normalized CPU workload test, the 500FX is at the top of the chart with an average steady state CPU temperature of 66 C. And in the fan normalized game testing, the 500FX is in the middle of the chart because not having that bottom fan does affect the GPU temperatures in this case. So what do I think of the Be Quiet PureBase 500FX? It's a really nice looking case that has really good cooling performance with an air cooler right out of the box. Now, if you want to put an AIO along the top, the air pressures will change, which might affect the GPU temperatures. But with an air cooler, both CPU and GPU temperatures were fantastic. What was most impressive to me about the 500FX was how quiet it is, while still performing very well in my temperature testing. Now, I do wish or hope Be Quiet will release a white version of this case, because damn, that would look really good. So Be Quiet, like, come on, you have a white in all of your other cases in the pure base. Come on, let's see it. Let's see it. It'll look great. Now, that does lead me to, does this case make sense for you? And I guess that really does depend on if you like the look of the case and how much the pure base 500FX is in your area. And I do bring that up because at time of filming, it is on sale at Amazon.com and Newegg.com. Now, that doesn't help me here in Canada because the .cas don't even have them, but the .coms do, and it's $40 off. So that actually has it priced at 110 USD, which for how good this case is a very good price. I do have to admit. The 150 USD, there are other cases that perform very well as well that are at that price point, but at 110 USD, this is an excellent case. And I guess I'll just leave it there. So if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. There is the HFG Discord server. If you are a member, and it is free to become a member, you get to view all of my charts. I'll have a link to that down in the description. There is also Patreon, which I would like to thank my patron for supporting the channel. Thank you very much. I will also have a link to the Patreon if you'd like to support the channel as well. You may want to check out this video here. It should be along the same lines of this video you just watched. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.